Amita ma'am, and to my back team, Vaishnavi Manava. Thank you very much for organizing this on behalf of the Indian Cultural Heritage. And I'm so excited because in the churning of the COVID, we all are locked in, and yet it gives us a space for reflecting. So charming as you are, ma'am, Amita ji, it's very exciting for us to get your intake when we are looking at community spaces in terms of heritage. And I want my first question to you would be, what and where is the Basgo? Why, out of all the 100 endangered heritage site, why did you choose to speak on Basgo?
Well, I think, part of my heart is in Ladakh, and but to the World Monuments Watch by the Namgyal Institute for Research on Ladakhi Art and Cultural Heritage, who I'm also was associated with closely at the time. And I think it's one of the most important and perhaps most endangered of our sites because it was in the 16th century the capital of Ladakh, so it has enormous historical importance. Then, of course, over time it changed and the capital moved into Leh, but it was a mud fortress on top of a mountain and it lay on the Silk Route. And so the Silk Route gave it that huge importance, which one tends to not see today. You see the Silk Route through Leh, but it actually was through Basgo in the 16th and 17th century. And over time, of course, once the capital moved to Leh, the fort fell into disuse. But as is customary in India and as is our cultural tradition, the temples survived, the Chamchong, the Serzang, and the Chambalakhang. They survived very well.
So what are these? Are these the name or
these are the
they are
Gompa.
special? Okay,
These are the
Buddhist temples. Okay.
Yeah. So, and these remain in the narrative of the village. The residents of the village still worship. They still believe in the importance of it. And of course, the Chambalakhang, which we were very involved in, has this enormous 14-meter high Maitreya Buddha, which is very much venerated. And I think one of the things that has happened in the last 20 or 30 years is the impact of climate change in Ladakh. These are all mud brick buildings. And with increased rainfall precipitation, the mud is just fissuring. The roofs are melting away and the walls are just fissuring.
Right.
And what happens is it leaks through onto the paintings. And once the paintings are damaged, there's a change in the relationship with the temple, because after all, the Buddha must be perfect. These are incredible temples with, the whole story of Buddha's life depicted on the walls and his teachings. And so we decided this was what we were going to be really involved in.
So I was very intrigued by the fact of the young people who came forward and enacting the Jataka tales and the life of Buddha, in some way providing a kind of a intangible living life to those temples and to the ecology. So would you like to talk about, because today when we go to the Lodi Gardens or we go to the India Gate lawns or we go to in Mumbai to the seaside, the Marina Beach, these are public spaces which people own. And these public spaces also have a historical context. Not maybe ritual context, but at least a community identity context. And how this particular group has owned it and has contributed for people like you and your organization to come in. That is something which I would be very interested in.
I think what we have to be very clear of in Ladakh is the relationship between the temple and the villager is a constant. Remember the crops grown go up to the monastery. A child from the village at one time used to be given to the monastery. That relationship is economic, it's cultural, it's religious. It's because also, if you go back 50 years, these were completely secluded settlements. There was
Right.
almost no access from the mainstream India. Today, there are gas cylinders and food comes in from all over. But when I started work in Ladakh in the 1980s, there was no access, but for about 2 or 3 months, into Kashmir, more than through Manali, which is the big
Nali. Right.
connector now.
That
But in those
horrible
days, it
road
was
which goes, that horrible road and very precarious road.
that had a wonderful self-reliance, and therefore
Right.
these relationships with the community and their heritage was a much tighter relationship. It was, they depended on each other for food and nourishment, spiritual, cultural nourishment.
So, can
So
you
in
speak
fact, one of the
about a little?
things we did, World Monuments Fund, when it gives money, it expects the country, under one of its schemes, you have to match the funding. And we
Right.
didn't know how we were going to realize that in Basgo, because Basgo is a little village in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
The community decided was going to help, and all the youngsters, they head-loaded material required for conservation up to the site. And
My
we sat
God.
with our team and we monetized that. How many people came up and what the per day wage for that would be in Delhi. And we gave that as a matching fund. And so we were able to raise much more money.
So, give me an example of if I would carry about 10 stones up to the site, how much
What
would
would
I
it cost
get?
you in Delhi? And we
Yeah.
monetized that in Ladakh, and we gave that as the cost of um, the contribution of Ladakh to
So
the.
you match the fund with the, yeah. So you match the fund with the labor that was put in by the local community.
But you
Wow.
must understand, it was an offering of service. They did it on weekends.
Right.
Expect to be paid. Fun. It was an
Oh,
incredible thing to see. Coming all the way up the mountainside, head loading stone and earth and so on. The other thing is,
could
we
you talk a little bit about? So one was the idea of you are giving it as an offering to your. It becomes like a pilgrimage of service that you are recreating. Could you elaborate that when you came into the actual doings of the conservation? Here is a sacred site. I mean, we are looking, for instance, which is a living heritage site again. If the ASI wants to do the conservation work, it is the community who says, this is what we is getting spoiled and we need your help for this. How did this idea of sacrilege and sacredness get balanced with the more mundane temporal idea of conservation?
Well, one, it takes quite a lot of negotiation with the monks because we knew it would put the temple out of worship for 2 to 3 years.
Oh,
Because you have a very limited working season in Ladakh, you can only work 6 months.
right.
Um, the other was that we had to get the blessings of the Rinpoche. So he came to Basco.
So
He
which was the head monastery?
chemist,
Venice.
chemist. They deconsecrated the Buddha. They took the spirit of the Buddha and packed it away. It left the monastery. These are mind-blowing things, Navina. And then we were allowed to work. And every one of our team attended the prayer because nobody would touch it without having attended that ceremony. We
Wow.
then carried on with the conservation, and there were amazing things like we found the roof had been waterproofed with bhojpatra. Bhojpatra comes from Kashmir, now a protected species. So that took the whole winter's negotiation.
But what is so important in the Bhojapatra? What
That
is it?
was the traditional waterproofing system. They found it in the layers
Really?
and we used it. And it worked. It
And
worked.
how many Bhojapatra did you put in?
I think it was overlapping. We couldn't
Okay.
get that much because it's a protected species.
Right. Oh,
So we
wow.
got just enough. And it had to be trucked from Kashmir. So at the end of winter, it came in. Then the other very interesting factor was when our wall painting conservators came. The building got restored. The wall painting conservators came in, and with them came, so you're working with the community who are helping bring the material up, and you're working with the monks. So the monks informed us that the painters from Likir Monastery will arrive because they could touch the Buddha and we could not. So the mural
Oh,
paintings of the Buddha, their hands were sacred and ours were not. So there was this wonderful relationship where we had an exchange of technology. We shared pigments, we shared techniques, we shared scientific knowledge, and they restored the Buddha and we restored the rest. And
so
that, it was just mind-blowing, and I often think we would have saved many more paintings in Ladakh if we'd been able to build that relationship.
right. I mean,
And
when you're
then,
looking at Alchi is a very sad case where things have gone wrong, actually, where, or even Hemis for that matter, in several
yes,
sites.
but you have to be able, because the Hemis Monastery invited us to look at that, their work. You have to be able to understand and work with the cultural practice of the area. Scientific knowledge is not in India, or certainly in a sacred property, exclusive of the cultural practice. And if it is their belief that our hands are not, cannot touch the
So,
Buddha, so be it. But the learning exchange was wonderful. They
uh,
took pigments, they took the materials, they took everything. It was just a great exchange.
in the recent times, I mean, every Gompa has a certain ecology. It has water streams, it has fruit trees, they have the economy of the barley, they have apricot and walnut. In the recent times, we've been talking about locust attacks, but I nearly died because there was a caterpillar to which I became allergic in this area. And it just so happened I was traveling with two WHO doctors who gave me injections right there, and I survived. Otherwise, I would have perished that night. And everybody kept saying this word in the village, kiri, 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 kiri. And I'm just wondering that, how is a Gompa, which is the anchor of a cultural identity of a village, with it, everybody's drawing energy. Where is these changes? Where do these changes get located in the present dynamics?
I think it's extremely difficult because let's be honest that in this time there's also been a lot of development. There's a lot more access to material coming up from the
Yeah.
mainland, as it were, from the low country. So, and they've got used to it. They've got used to gas cylinders in their kitchens, so the traditional way of cooking has gone. Winters are still very cold, but they're now managed with different fuels as opposed to
Melting snow.
there are kiras and there are insects, and there is a changing ecology. And I think a lot of it has to do with much more intense planting and therefore a damper environment. And of course, rainfall precipitation. We've seen tremendous rainfall precipitation, but also, Navina, the changing snow patterns. I was there when we met 3 years ago. They've been 3 years, and last year they had huge quantities of snow. So, because they live on melting snow.
They
Their
do.
land is irrigated from melting snow. And there are experiments being done in one village. They're trying to pack the snow like icebergs and save it for the summer. So there are very interesting experiments being done. I don't
Um,
think we could turn the clock back to it being the pristine, exclusive, inward village ever again.
Exotic.
That
The
story,
exotic.
exotic,
Yeah.
has moved on.
I would like to also ask you, in your personal journey with the Basgo temple, as an outsider and yet becoming an insider, can you narrate some of the beliefs, some of the myths?
I had a friend who was trying to climb Sangri, and twice he
That,
failed.
Right.
And I was talking to Stock. I said, he's coming again for a third. He said he must go and seek the Buddha's blessings, and then he will climb Stoke Concrete. He did. And you will never know whether he was going to climb it anyway. It comes through very clearly. You just absorb their beliefs, you absorb the culture. You will always walk a prayer wheel.
Because I recall there was and he had this altitude problem. And it was very interesting. We went to a Lamu, an oracle, and she
Yeah.
said, you know, and she said, hold this in your journey. You're not going to get sick. You're not going to. And his wife constantly said, what's wrong with this man? He's crossing the Khardungla Pass and he's not fearing, his spirits are not coming out, and he's so synergized. So I think you're right. I mean, these are amazing.
I went to the Sabu Lamu.
Yeah, thank you. The very, very powerful old lady.
Gone with someone who'd gone to be treated. And I was sitting at the back of the room, and when she'd finished, she looked at me. You're very worried, but everything is going to be all.
Yes.
I mean, she was absolutely right. I mean, I was at the time very worried, and of course, as time went on, everything was all right. But I think it's a very, very immersive experience spiritually. Culturally. Yeah. You have to work with the environment. I don't think there are many of us. I mean, I'm appalled now. You get these flights and nobody takes that day off.
Acclimatize, yeah.
And I met a whole lot of these people in a hotel near Alchi, and they were wasted at the end of the day. And I thought,
right.
Absorb the culture, absorb the environment.
Have a chang.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. Have a chang, have a thukpa.
My one last point is post-COVID, in the eye of ruptures with regard to completely destabilized a lot of things in the way you and I have been accessing Ladakh since the 80s and 90s. We have seen Ladakh in many ways. What would you suggest that some points are pondered even when Ladakh reopens for tourism in some takeaways from this talk?
Complicated because Article 370, there's a military action and there's COVID. They're so hugely dependent on tourism that a newly invented system of tourism is going to need to come back to sustain them. But the dialogue that needs to go forward is, how do you calibrate eat local, go local, meet local? We need to do that. We have to look at, how do you get the garbage out of Ladakh? That is a huge issue. In the early years, Navina, when we first met, it was all trekkers and left. Exactly. But today, nobody is eating local food. It's all being imported. And I think that narrative needs to change. And we need to invest much more with that. There's, of course, the snow leopard. Right. They are trying to the forefront because it changes, they understand it on a day-to-day basis, and they will work a way forward to so that it's a lot more sustainable. The critical thing would be to remove them.
Thank you so much, Amita ma'am, and any way we can collaborate and create a better Ladakh post 370 scenario world. In the post-conflict scenario, inshallah, we will do so.
Inshallah,
thank you so
much. To do that with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Navina. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you on behalf of Cultural Heritage. Thank you so much.
And on behalf of World Monuments, thank you for showcasing our wonderful project.